Chapter 90 Seeking Help. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. At the break of dawn, as the sun slowly peeked out while the sky was still tinged in darkness, the black guards who were making their rounds were chatting as they patrolled the mountain. Suddenly, they saw a shadow from the side and a few of them rushed forward in alarm. "Who's there?" Leng Hua had forcefully pushed himself all this way and his body felt heavy and sluggish as he continued on forward as he stumbled on step by step in difficulty. He fell down and struggled back up countless times. His back was completely soaked in his own blood, he had long become numb from the pain. His vision was also groggy as everything was now a blur. When he saw the black guards who were on patrol, he wanted to rush forward but his legs gave way and he could only helplessly call out in a cracking voice as his hands reached out towards them. "Help me. To see Ling Xuang. She's my sister." His voice was very weak but nevertheless, those black guards had heard it clearly. Ling Xuang's brother. Their eyes had a hint of surprise when they heard that. One came forward to check on his wounds while another rushed towards the inner region. Whether it was true or false, they still had to inform Ling Xuang on this matter. "What did you say?" "My brother." When she had came out to check on the barrier, she heard the black guard report the matter to the captain, her heart leapt up in fright. "Where's he now?" "Where?" "Bring me to him, quick." Leng Hua should have been with the young master in the courtyard. Why did he come here? Did something happen? When Ling Xuang rushed over in a flurry and saw the unconscious Leng Hua drenched in blood, his blue robes completely dyed in red and his face was as white as sheet. She was flustered and her heart jolted in shock. She cried out, "Leng Hua!" She started screaming hysterically and wanted to rush forward to hold him but didn't know where to hold on to. She could only anxiously cry out, "Faster! Bring him in quickly!" Supporting him was the black guard captain and another guard who was following her from behind. When they were reaching the peach blossom boundary barrier, the two were inwardly ecstatic and thought that they could finally go in and have a look. However, just as they were about to reach, she stopped in her tracks. "Bring him over to me." She came forward and carefully leaned over as she supported Leng Hua and brought him in step by step into the peach blossom barrier. Very soon, the two silhouettes could no longer be seen as they disappeared into the peach blossoms. How mysterious. We've been here for almost a month yet we've never been inside before. Just thinking about it makes me feel rather stifled, that black guard was muttering to himself, his heart was overwhelmed with curiosity, especially on the identity of the person living inside. The black guard captain looked thoughtfully ahead and looked back at that black guard and said in a heavy tone, "It's not as if you've just started working as a black guard, with regards to our rules, you should jolly well know it by heart by now. Things that are not meant to be known, don't ask, don't be curious. There's nothing good in knowing these things." "Yes, sir." After being warned by his captain, the black guard quickly lowered his head in shame. Leng Xuang had brought the unconscious Leng Hua to the room and checked his wounds. She quickly dressed his wounds simply and quickly went to Feng Jiu's door and knocked. "Mistress, mistress." Urgency could be heard in her strained voice and there was also a hint of panic in it. Feng Jiu, who had been sleeping, stirred and woke up when she heard Leng Xuang's call. She draped on a robe and opened the door. "What happened?" Her voice still sounded raspy but her eyes were alert. Because she knew that Leng Xuang would not knock at her door at the break of dawn if not for an emergency. "Mistress, little Hua came, but he's unconscious and soaked in blood. I'm afraid something has happened to young master." When she heard this, Feng Jiu's heart sank. "Where's he? Quick! Bring me to him." Chapter 91 Not Allowed to Advance. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Leng Xuang had brought him over to her room and once Feng Jiu entered the room, she was overwhelmed with the stench of blood that hung heavily in the air. She came to the bed and saw that his top had already been removed and he was lying on his tummy, his whole face was deathly pale. Looking at the long gash across his back, her eyes stirred and she quickly reached out to take his pulse. Leng Xuan, who was standing anxiously beside her, quickly reported, "Little Hua's injury on the back is the worst one of all, the other injuries are all just superficial wounds and some abrasions. When I brought him in, the blood had coagulated but he was already unconscious." Feng Jiu probed his pulse and her gaze rested on his feet. His boots were still on, however they were drenched completely in blood and there were also quite a few holes in them. She reached into her sleeves and took out a brown pill and placed it in Leng Hua's mouth. She then took another bottle of medicine and passed it to Leng Xuan. "Take off his boots and help him clean up the wounds on his feet." "Yes." Leng Xuan quickly held on to the bottle of medicine preciously and carefully removed the boots. Her tears started falling when she saw that his feet was in a terrible state, broken skin, blisters all over and blood everywhere. Hot tears could not stop as she tried her best to clean up the wounds, using her sleeves to wipe off her sniffles and tears as she went along. Seeing this, Feng Jiu comforted her. Although the wound on his back is deep, fortunately the blood had dried up, or else the journey here, which takes about 4 hours, would have already taken away his life. As for his feet, it's just some skin trauma, with the proper care and medication, he'll recover in a couple of days, there's no danger. She was now most worried about her brother. Leng Hua was now unconscious, so she could not find out what had happened. After listening to her words, Leng Xuan finally calmed down. After she had finished applying the medicine and wrapping up his feet, Leng Xuan realized that her mistress was already no longer in the room. She went out and saw Feng Jiu standing in the courtyard. She asked, "Mistress, may I go out and investigate what had happened?" Feng Jiu shook her head, "No, we'll wait for Leng Hua to wake up first, no one knows what had happened better than him. Do not worry, young master will be fine." "Yeah." Feng Jiu nodded absent-mindedly. "When Leng Hua wakes up, call me." After which she returned to her own room. Once she entered her room, she quickly went into the spatial spirit palace and with the flick of her wrist, a bottle of medicine appeared in her palm. This was a medicine that could enhance her cultivation. However, this was the first time she had refined this medicine and she had yet to test out its efficiency and did not know whether there will be any side effects. The little phoenix saw her staring intently at the bottle in her palm, and he could not hold in his curiosity and toddled over with his little legs and asked in a baffled tone, "What's with that bottle?" "I want to enhance my cultivation and advance to the peak stage." She gripped the bottle tighter in determination. Little Fire Phoenix looked at her wide-eyed, bewildered. "Have you gone mad? You are currently at the mid-level mystical warrior stage. Even if you want to charge up to the peak stage, even with the aid of this spatial spirit palace, you'll still need at least 6 months to achieve it. If you're going to forcefully push through and if something crops up, completely crippling your current cultivation is one thing, what if you even lose your life along with it? Do you know the gravity of the situation?" Seeing that she did not have a single reaction, but only had her gaze fixated on the bottle in her hands, he quickly added, "There's more. Mystical cultivation also needs martial arts besides cultivating solely on mystical powers. Only when both aspects are joined together could a mystical warrior be able to bring out the best qualities and exhibit the greatest power. So even if your mystical powers have increased, with little comprehension in martial arts, it's also useless. Do you know that Guan Shilin is in danger?" She narrowed her eyes in resolution. "He is my brother, I cannot ignore this matter." Chapter 92 Actually really awesome. You are listening at novelfull.audio. But that does not mean you should stake your life on it. The little phoenix glared, his chubby little face fuming as he said, "If any accident happens during the level advancement, who would then go save him? Although my current cultivation is able to take on a cultivator in the pinnacle level of the warrior stage, I am still worried that if the opponent's power turns out to be beyond that, it would definitely result in an irrecoverable situation for us." Her voice hesitated a moment as she went deep in thought. "Moreover, I had set up a barrier on the courtyard and it would be impossible for anyone who isn't a barrier master to unravel it. Hence, even when Leng Hua still has not awakened to tell me everything, I know for a fact that the matter this time is definitely not ordinary, and the enemies I will be facing are also very powerful. Alright, you don't need to take that medicine. If at that time you are really unable to deal with it, revered me here will then help you. Hearing that, Feng Jiu's gaze fell onto the little figure, her eyes not hiding the suspicions she had against those words of his. Little fella, although you are the ancient fire phoenix, but you are after all still in your infancy and still looking like a 3-year-old human child. If the enemies are people that even I am unable to deal with, what would you be able to do against them? There. She really feels that this pudgy little guy with his short hands and legs was just a little kid who looks just like a little prosperity doll and would not possess much battle power. After all, he still has not matured, has he? If they really encounter a powerful opponent that even she was unable to defeat, she sincerely did not believe that the kid possessed any capability to help. However, the little phoenix was immediately unhappy upon hearing those words. His chubby little arms folded across his chest and he plopped down to the floor on his behind, as he glared at her angrily to say. You shouldn't despise people like that. Revered me is not even close to being as useless as a human 3-year-old. Revered me is really very powerful. He re-emphasized the fact, seemingly afraid that Feng Jiu did not believe him. Mistress, little Hua has awoken. From outside, Ling Shuang's voice came in. Within the space, when Feng Jiu heard that, she glanced another time at the pill in her hand and thought about it a moment before she kept it away. She then turned her head to give a reminder. You be good and stay inside here to cultivate. After saying that, her figure flashed as she exited the space. Opening the door, she saw Ling Shuang standing there in glee. Mistress, Hua has awoken. She nodded her head and strode towards Ling Shuang's room. When she came into the room, she saw that Ling Hua had already opened his eyes, and upon seeing her enter, he was attempting to get up, but Feng Jiu pressed him down and said. You still have injuries on you. Just remain lying down. Mistress, young master has been captured. His voice was still very weak, but still much better than before. You know who those people are? She asked as she thought to herself. At least he was just captured, as long as he wasn't killed. That middle-aged man said they were from the Su family, and claimed that Mistress killed his son and 2 of his elders. Hence, he had come to seek Mistress to settle the score. Hearing those words, Ling Shuang was slightly taken aback. Her mistress killed people. How was that possible? Mistress powers was at most considered to be as damaging as an embroidered pillow. So how was it possible she could kill someone who was of an elder level of a family clan? When Feng Jiu heard that, her eyes glinted, and it dawned upon her. So it's the Su family. That second master and all the several other people had already been killed by her, so how had they found out that she was the one that killed them? Did they find her portrait from the black market's bounty board and deduced it from there? Did they bring someone who was well versed with barriers with them at that time? And how did you manage to escape? Tell me everything in detail. The head of the Su family brought a gray-robed old man with them, and he was the one who broke the barrier. As for me. His voice hesitated. When he thought back to the situation then, he still found it all incredibly unbelievable. He then said. Mistress, I found out that the soft and wispy Tai Chi is actually really awesome. Chapter 93 Insufferable Torment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At that moment, I was reacting almost completely by reflex, and if not for the Tai Chi that Mistress taught me, I believe I would have died under the swords of those 2 men. When he thought back about it, he was still slightly traumatized in his heart. After all, in all his days before this, he had always been protected by his elder sister, as he had a weak constitution and was often bedridden with sickness. Incidents that happened the way it had that night was completely inconceivable to him before this. But, after that night, a thought had formed in his mind with strong determination. He wanted to practice cultivation as well. Regardless, even if he wouldn't be able to compare with his elder sister, he will still cultivate. With that, he will not need people to always protect him, and if anything really happened, he might be able to protect them as well. Hearing those words, Leng Shuang involuntarily turned to look at her mistress, finding it all rather incredulous in her mind. That martial arts mistress practiced could actually take on an enemy. She had always thought that her mistress had practiced that just to give her body some exercise and had not thought that it would turn out to save little Hua's life. After hearing what Leng Hua said, Feng Jiu nodded her head and reminded him. You should rest well and nurse yourself back to health. You do not need to think about anything else. And she turned to go outside immediately. Leng Shuang followed right behind her and seeing Feng Jiu standing within the yard, she asked. Mistress, what should we do next? I will be making a trip back there and you'll help me oversee the things here. Mistress is thinking to go save young master by yourself. Leng Shuang was rather taken aback, as she continued to say worriedly. Those people hold powers even young master is unable to take on, and if mistress goes there, wouldn't it be delivering yourself into the enemy's arms? She did not say those words aloud. But from what she could see, even if her mistress was highly proficient in Tai Chi, it would definitely still not be a match for a head of a family clan. Moreover, she was just one person and the enemy was an entire family clan. Even putting the disparity of their powers aside, the mere difference in terms of the number of people was already too large, so how could she allow her mistress to go seek her own death? Those are not things that you should be worrying about. You just have to do what I have asked and that will do. She turned around and went back to her room, changed into men's clothes, and put on the golden mask with the Madara flowers, and the air around her immediately transformed with her change. The air that surrounded her was sharp, her demeanor indolent, feeling as dangerous as the Lord of Darkness, mysterious. The aura she had always suppressed and hid all this time, was released at that moment, one that people would not be able to overlook. She went out of the yard, and swept through the peach tree forest, her mystical powers surging, and with her queer mystifying steps, she moved so fast like a ghost, leaving not a single trace of her passing behind Datsu family dungeon. Swoosh! Piak! Ung! The sound of the cracking whip brought about swooshing sounds as its tip tore through the air, every single crack of the whip accompanied by a muffled groan. The air hung heavily with the thick stench of blood in that dim and damp underground dungeon. Upon the crossbeam wooden stake, Guan Shilin was lashed, his body all covered in wounds, the whip lashes crisscrossed over each other, blood flowing down together with his sweat, soaking completely into the hopelessly tattered clothes hanging from his body. From the moment he had been captured and brought in here, the lashing from the whip had not stopped at all. He was so drained and exhausted that he did not even have the energy to shout out in agony, and he felt as if he was detached from his body, so numb he could not really feel the pain. He did not even have the strength to lift his head anymore, but the person waving the whip did not relent in the slightest as he cursed while he cracked the whip continuously. Who let you kill me, son? Who let you kill my second brother? Who let you annihilate 2 of my elders? Who let you make yourself an enemy of my Su family? The guard standing at the side saw that Guan Shilin was already on his last vestiges of consciousness as his head finally drooped when he fainted, and he said in a highly cautious tone. Family head, the man has already fainted. Bring me the red-hot branding iron. Burn him awake. Chapter 94 Visiting the Su Mansion by Nai. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The guard was startled, but he quickly acknowledged the order and went to the back to bring a burning red-hot branding iron, before he carefully handed it over to the family head. I would like to see just how strong-willed you are. Family head Su said that in a chilling voice as the branding iron in his hand was about to pushed onto Guan Shilin's body. The red-hot branding iron was still sizzling with steam and even the guard could not continue to watch. Hold it. A dominating voice filled with power reached him, which caused family head Su, who was just about to press the branding iron, suddenly hold his hand, to turn with a frown on his face to look at the person who had just come in. The gray-robed old man came striding in. Detecting the strong stench of blood within the dungeon and seeing the already unconscious Guan Shilin, his brows creased up together while his face darkened, looking highly displeased as he stared at family head Su. This person is still of use to us. If you torture him to death and the girl does not come, who should this old man here look for? Hearing those words, family head Su did not say anything but just handed the branding iron over to the guard at the side and said, "There is no need for senior to worry about that. That wretched lass will definitely come, if she does not turn up, even if he has to turn the Cloudy Moon City upside down, he will definitely find her." Night fell, and the Su mansion was lit with lanterns bright as day. Many teams of guards crawled inside and outside of the place, setting up an inescapable net, just to capture the prey that might just appear here tonight. Hidden within the shadows to observe them for an entire day just to await nightfall, Feng Jiu suddenly saw a familiar figure in black. Her brows creased up and with a flourish of red, she shot towards that figure. Leng Shuang had just leapt up upon the wall at the main doors when a hand suddenly closed over her shoulder, and another clasped over her mouth as she was pulled into the shadows. She was just about to retaliate when a familiar voice said softly, "It's me." At the same moment she spoke, Feng Jiu released her hand, and stared with a frown at Leng Shuang who had turned around, before she said, "Didn't I ask you to oversee the things at Peach Blossom Ridge? Why are you here instead?" "Mistress." Leng Shuang's eyes lit up as she replied. "I was worried about you, and so I came here." Letting her mistress come conduct the rescue alone, she would not be at ease, hence, after she told Leng Hua to look after himself, she immediately came here following Feng Jiu. "Foolishness." She spoke in a hushed tone. "If I had not stopped you, you would have messed up my plans tonight." Upon hearing that, Leng Shuang quickly lowered her head and replied, "I'm sorry, mistress. Go back now." Against those words, she quickly raised her head up and shook her head obstinately to say, "I will not go back. I will help mistress rescue the young master. Going in there, you might really be killed." Leng Shuang's gaze was determined as she looked at Feng Jiu and she said, "Leng Shuang's life belongs to mistress, and even if I have to die for it, I will not allow mistress to go take the risk herself." Feng Jiu stared at the young girl for a long while before she turned her gaze away. "Since you are not afraid of death, then follow me." "Yes." Leng Shuang's heart was delighted and her eyes lit up. Feng Jiu led her quietly around to leap onto the wall over the doors at the back. Hiding within the shadows, Feng Jiu immediately saw that areas in the outer perimeter without any guards on patrols had boundary barriers set up, and if she wanted to go in, she would have to pass through those barriers. "There are boundary barriers inside. Follow me very closely, you cannot take even one step wrong." The moment her voice fell, she leapt down and led Leng Shuang into the boundary barrier. Meanwhile, inside the Su mansion, within a courtyard, family head Su was sipping on tea as he asked in a slightly worried voice, "Senior, can that boundary barrier really trap a person inside? Could it be that she is actually already here but just that we do not know it?" "It won't," the old man shook his head and said confidently. "Against this old man's barriers, no one within the entire Sun Glory country will be able to break through. As long as she dares to come, we will not need to lift a finger and she will definitely be trapped within the barrier, unable to escape." Chapter 95 Setting the Su Mansion Ablaze. You are listening at novelfull.audio. However, the two of them did not know that the person they were talking about had already walked out from the boundary barrier safe and sound. Once out of the barrier, they were immediately confronted with an approaching team of night patrol guards. Just as Leng Shuang was thinking that it was too late to hide, she was whisked away by Feng Jiu to the other side, quick as a flash of lightning as they moved, completely undetected by the night patrol. Once they came to a stop, Leng Shuang found herself stunned, her eyes wide with incredulity as she stared at her mistress beside her. Movements like that would still be beyond her even if she cultivated for another 10 years. "Go. Feng Jiu whispered in a hushed tone, leading her towards the side. Along the way, although they occasionally encountered the Su family's night patrols, they managed to avoid them and the guards were not alerted. Leng Shuang finally understood what her mistress' words earlier meant. In here, the outer ring was set up with a boundary barrier, while the inner ring was crawling with night patrolling guards. If she had come in on her own, she would surely have been discovered by now. Wait here. Leaving her curt instructions, Feng Jiu leapt out and clasped her hand over the last guard who brought up the rear and pulled him into the shadows. When the patrol had moved far away, she then asked in a low tone. Where is Guan Shilin? The guard's eyes were widened in terror. Pleading with his eyes, he stretched out a finger and pointed out the direction. He kicked out, trying to struggle free, and upon seeing that, Feng Jiu's eyes glinted chillingly and she broke his neck with a snap of her wrist, before dragging him deeper into the shadows to dispose of his body. The duo moved out once again, towards the direction pointed out by the guard. They avoided all the patrols they encountered and Feng Jiu only stopped when they came near an area filled with rock formations of miniature mountains further inside. Leng Shuang looked at Feng Jiu questioningly, not understanding why they had suddenly stopped. Feng Jiu's eyes scanned the entire area before her and spotted 4 guards standing before a particular cluster of rock formation further up and noticed that there were several more people hidden within the shadows in the surrounding area. Her eyes showed she was deep in thought. She knew she would be unable to dispose of all the guards both exposed in the open and those who were hidden quickly enough without alerting them, and she concluded she could only use drugs. She flipped her palm and pulled out a medicine bottle from the spatial ring and silently slipped upwind. She dispersed the suds from the medicine in her hand as she scattered them into the night breeze and waited quietly. Until all the guards who were hidden and in the open had fallen to the ground, Feng Jiu then signaled for Leng Shuang to come out. You stand guard here. I'll go inside and see. Immediately after her voice dropped, she swung the rock door panel open and went inside. Once inside, the damp and dank stench assaulted her, and the thick stench of blood mixed within made her brows creased up together. Especially when she saw the badly bloodied and mangled person tied to the crossbeam stake, her heart winced and a murderous aura of massacre spilled forth. Big brother. She called out in a hushed voice, but Guan Shilin had lost consciousness and there was no reaction. Immediately after that, she quickly stuffed a pill into his mouth and cut the ropes before bring him outside. I'll draw the guards and you find a chance to bring him out of here. Leng Shuang, who was carrying Guan Shilin, nodded and reminded Feng Jiu worriedly. Mistress, please be careful. Go quickly. Leng Shuang acknowledged, and seeing them leaving in another direction, Feng Jiu turned her gaze upon the main building in the inner perimeter, her eyes filled with sinister and bloodthirsty murder, and a low voice rumbled out from her mouth. I will make you realize that there are some people you cannot afford to antagonize. Fire. Fire. Put out the fire. Family head Su and the old man who were chatting in the yard had, upon hearing the shouts of fire coming from outside, immediately shot to their feet and roared. What happened? A guard came running in looking highly flustered. Family head. Bad news. Many places within the mansion has caught fire and the flames are highly intense. The flames are spreading quickly and will reach here soon. Hearing that, the 2 men's expression changed drastically and they rushed quickly outside. Chapter 96, Order to Kill. You are listening at novelfull.audio. But when they came outside, and family head Su saw the situation, he almost fainted away. The enormous Su mansion, just its guards alone, would number about 100 of them. But before his eyes, all of them were lying upon the ground, not known whether they were still alive or dead. Only 2 elders and 4 of the Su mansion's team leaders of the Master Warrior grade were still conscious. And atop the wall of a doorway, a figure in red stood standing high up there, watching everything below. The red figure looked mesmerizing with his fiery red clothes fluttering in the night wind, his golden Madara flower face mask made more mysterious as it reflected the light from the raging flames all around. But, when he saw the golden Madara mask and that suit of red clothes, family head Su's face turned pale as he exclaimed. You are the Ghost Doctor. Ghost Doctor. A highly mysterious person who was both feared and revered. No one knew his true gender, and only knew that he was always dressed in a suit flamboyant and sinister red, with that golden mask filled with blossoms of Madara flowers in full bloom. Many major families within the Cloudy Moon City had sought an audience, but had all been rejected. The ruler of the Sun Glory country had asked to meet him, and had been rejected just the same. The black market spread throughout many countries held him in great esteem, and saw him as a highly distinguished guest. It was rumored that he possessed medical skills that could bring one back from the brink of death. It was rumored that a dose of medicine from his could instantly raise the power of warriors. It was rumored. There were many rumors, and, this entity who existed only in rumors, had come to his Su mansion today, and had appeared in such a manner. How could he not be expected to not fall into panic? That was a person whom the powers behind the black market wanted to protect. If any of the other powers around here knew about this, the Su family would no longer be able to maintain a foothold within the Cloudy Moon City anymore. However, as the fear gripped at his heart, a mad and crazy thought suddenly came to his mind. Kill him. As long as he is dead, the powers behind the black market will not know that he was the one responsible. Once he is dead, the Su family will not need to fear any form reprisal from the black market. Kill him. I want him killed. He suddenly snapped back to his senses and shouted loudly, his finger pointing at the figure in red standing high up upon the wall, his voice sounding highly malicious and almost maniacal. She must not be allowed to leave this place alive. The gray-robed old man frowned and threw a glance at family head Su before quickly looking away, his gaze fixed upon the red figure, his eyes dancing with a glint of excitement and anticipation. No. This old man here wants him alive. The two elders stepped quickly to come stand beside their family head. Their clothes had been slightly burnt off by the fire, and as they had just escaped out from the fire, their hair was also in a mess, their faces smudged, making for a rather sorry sight. Family head, there's knockout drugs within the fire. Everyone below the Master Warrior grade have been knocked out. Kill him, now. Family head Su bellowed in a deep voice, spitting out the words one by one, shouting out his order for all the 4 Master Warriors to kill that figure in red, and then immediately turning his eyes onto the gray-robed old man beside him, so overcome with rage he had slightly lost his reason as he questioned. Didn't you say that he wouldn't be able to get past your barrier? Didn't you say that you will definitely know it once he enters your barrier? He set fire to destroy my Su family's century-old heritage. If I do not wash the Su mansion with his blood today, I shall not let the matter rest. The very moment his voice dropped, a mouthful of blood spewed forth from his mouth, as he was sent flying through the air by a single palm strike, to crash heavily into the corner of the wall before falling right into the blazing flames raging upon the ground. He did not even have the time to cry out when a loud crash sounded and the entire face of the wall collapsed, burying family head Su under it. Family head. Chapter 97 Night in Blood's Shade. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The 2 elders called out in shock and the 14 leaders' faces turned ashen, their eyes appalled as they looked at the gray-robed old man who had struck so suddenly. The old man's eyes were narrowed slightly as a malicious aura emanated from his body, his voice contemptuous and chilling as it slowly came out from his mouth. Who do you think you are? You dare to question me? His malicious gaze turned, which startled the 2 elders beside him, causing them to unconsciously retreat 2 steps backwards. One palm, and it had killed their family head who was at the pinnacle of the warrior master grade. 1 palm was all it took to not even give their family head the opportunity to stand up at all, but had his life snatched out from him. Within the roaring blaze, under the heap of rubble, the family head of the century-old Su family had suddenly and unexpectedly died such an ignoble death. Standing on her high vantage point, Feng Jiu raised up an eyebrow under her mask, as her eyes flashed with a momentary puzzlement. L.RG, aren't those two people in cahoots? But he had struck out at family head Sue and killed him. Killed with one palm strike. Her gaze fell upon the gray-robed old man, staring at the mystical energy gathered around the old man's palm that was visible to the naked eye. Grand Warrior Master. The gray-robed old man's powers was above a warrior master, a grand warrior master. It has to be that. To be able to take out a warrior master at the pinnacle with just one single palm strike, his powers would naturally have to be of a higher level than family head Sue. But, a grand warrior master. The current Fengjiu would have no issues dealing with someone who was at family head Sue's level. But to take on a grand master warrior, and his powers were seemingly not just at the initial levels of the mystical grand warrior master grade, it was thought even two of Fengjiu would still not be a match for such an opponent. Go, capture her for this old man. Remember, this old man wants her alive. The gray-robed old man remained standing there and did not move from his spot, his hands crossed over each other, hidden within his sleeves. His eyes were shining with excitement and anticipation as he stared at the flamboyant and mesmerizing figure in red, his gaze feeling so strange it gave one chills. Yes. Yes. No matter whether it was the two elders, or whether it was the 4 team leaders, even when they saw their family head murdered by the old man, they did not dare seek revenge for their family head. As deep down in their hearts, they knew the opponent's power far exceeded thereby too much, and if they did not comply, the next ones to die would be them. When she saw the several men surround her and attack, Fengjiu's eyes flashed briefly, and she drew out her dagger, flipping it over to hold it in a reverse grip. She summoned her chi and leapt, landing upon a roof not much further off. The men pursued behind her closely, with no weapons in their hands, almost as if they fearful of the old man. The men did not dare to use any sharp blades against her, but unknowingly making it easier for her to kill them instead. There's no escape. One of the elders shouted, reaching a hand out to grip Fengjiu's shoulder, with mystical energies surging, and his warrior master's oppressive aura pushed out in assault at that moment. The elder was thinking pin the opponent down first, before proceeding with the capture, but unexpectedly, his hand had suddenly instead been grabbed, and twisted behind his back. His opponent's ghostly movements, and the tricky movements of her hands, made it impossible for him to avoid falling into the enemy's hands. Before he could even try to retreat, an icy cold dagger had already been lightly pressed against his neck. When the other captors saw that, their hearts almost stopped, overcome with shock and incredulity. They all knew the third elder's powers well, but he had been so easily countered and pinned. Even fallen into the enemy's hands where his life would be decided by the prey. Don't kill me. Third elder was in a panic, unable to believe that the scene he had visualized had manifested in a blink, but the person being held in restraint was him instead. Too late. Fengjiu's voice was cold, as she pulled the dagger within her hand. A deep wound split open at the neck, and blood gushed out. Chapter 98 Impure Thoughts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Third Elder. The second elder shouted out in shock, his voice trembling. Seeing the third elder who was as close to him as a brother having his throat slit, the sight of the blood gushing out drove a stabbing pain into his heart, and made his eyes burn. His pair of hands clenched up, the knuckles on his fists making a crackling sound, as an intense hatred boiled within his chest, like sizzling hot lava, threatening to burst out from his chest. The family head was dead, and among the 4 elders, he was the only one left. The Su mansion was also burning as the blazing flames raged, and it was expected that the place would finally fall into ruin. The Su family had fallen. And all of it was caused by the one person before his eyes. She must be killed. Only by killing her would he be able to vent out the fiery rage within him. Only by killing her would he be able to let the spirits of the 134 lives in the Su mansion rest in peace. Swish. With a cold steely flash, a long sword was suddenly snaked out from within his sleeve, its sharp point angled to the ground. His malicious and murderous gaze was locked upon the figure in red before him, mystical energy infused thickly with murder flaring out from his body. He was summoning out every single ounce of power within him to the surface, to commit himself to this battle to the death. At the moment they saw the third elder was killed, the bodies of the 4 team leaders stiffened, and instinctively wanting to run away, but, their bodies had just ready to sprint away when several silver needles shot them in the back of their necks. The 4 men groaned and their bodies froze a moment, before falling limply to the ground, tumbling right into the roaring flames. Arf! Ar! Screams of agony came out from within the flames, as the 4 people rolled, their bodies on fire, struggling to stand up to escape. In the end, they were engulfed and consumed by the merciless fire. This old man stakes his reputation as an elder of the Sioux family and will hereby vow. Even if I am to die, I will drag you down along with me. The second elder's sinister voice rang out, and his mystical energy flared, as chi of the sword shot out from his sword's point. The visible sword's chi was like a venomous snake, flying at a blinding speed towards his opponent. The speed that he moved at, the viciousness of his strike, was led by his strong determination to send his opponent to his death. Seeing that, Feng Jiu did not dare to be careless as she imbued mystical energy into the dagger she held in her hand in response. As the sword and dagger clashed, the clangor resounded, as sharp and malicious gusts of chi spilled out from between the two, whistling loudly as it sliced through the air. Down below, seeing that the second elder's attacks were vicious and fatal, the gray-robed old man's eyes deepened, his face showing displeasure as he eyed the 2 people higher up on top. To him, the girl was too useful to him, for her to be killed just like this. But, when he saw that the girl was able to remain completely unharmed after receiving so many strikes from the second elder, the eyes that were gazing upon her unconsciously showed some surprise. After all, from what he had seen, since she had already shown herself to be skilled in boundary barriers and medicine, he had thought she would undoubtedly be unable to cope with battle skills cultivation on top of that. But against all expectations, she had surprised him once more. That's right. Surprise. He had thought that she would not be able to unravel the boundary barrier he erected, and the moment she stepped into it, she was bound to be trapped. But she had been able to pass through unscathed without even alerting him as the person who set it up, that had obviously told him, that her barrier cultivation was more profound than he had imagined. And, he was even more certain, on her, there would definitely be ancient texts on boundary barriers that he had never researched before. When that thought came into his mind, his eyes lit up. Boundary barrier ancient texts. He had never thought that he would stumble across such a treasure within a measly 9th-grade little country like this. But since he came across it, he would never let it slip away. Together with the girl, he wanted them all. He concealed his excitement as his gaze fell upon the highly alluring figure, imagining the kind of flawless beauty that hid behind that mask, his heart harboring secret intentions. After he got his hands on the boundary barrier ancient texts, this eye-grabbing and flamboyant girl would then be made to become a repository source for his cultivation. Chapter 99 Alarming all sides. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Arg. A cry of pain sounded, and it could be seen upon the roof. The long sword within the second elder's hand had been sent flying with a well-placed kick. The long sword sailed through the air and fell within the roaring flames below. Having been kicked hard, his hand between his thumb and second finger was suddenly feeling numb and extremely sore, feeling as if the bones in his wrist had been broken by the kick. The pain spread through his arm and he was unable to lift it as it hung limply at his side, trembling slightly, his face pale as he stared at the red figure in front of him. Against the bright glare from the raging fire below, the red figure looked even more dazzling to the eye, the jet-black hair blown up by the night's wind, as if a pair of hands had gently lifted up her hair, to fan out behind her, flying against the night. The golden mask with its flamboyant mandara flowers in full bloom, making her seem all the more mysterious, unfathomable. A bloodthirsty murderous aura emanated from her body, highly intense, the aura so strong that it made his heart fill with fear. It was to be expected. If the enemy was just a nobody, the several elders that they were would not have fallen one after another under her hands, where even their family head had paid with the existence of the entire Sioux family all because of her. When that thought came into his mind, he clenched up his jaw tightly, and gathered all his mystical energies within to have them all surge to a point just below his navel. In a quick moment, his entire body bloated up very quickly like a rubber ball filled up with air, where the robe on his body split and tore from the sudden expansion, exposing the originally skinny body underneath. But, at that moment, that withered and skinny-looking body was still continuing to swell, as the energies expanded explosively, stretching his skin to the point his veins or arteries underneath were clearly visible but looking as if he was about to explode at any moment. I've said it before. Even if I am to die, I will drag you down with me. The second elder shouted almost maniacally, his head of gray and white hair flying in a complete mess as the chi surged all around him. His hand stretched wide open, and he leapt madly towards Fengjiu, the speed that he moved at, suddenly doubling from when he had previously battled Fengjiu. When the old man down below saw that the second elder was inciting his own body to blow up to kill the girl together within the blast, the expression on his face immediately changed, and he shouted suddenly in an anxious fluster and exasperation. Damn it! I told you I wanted her alive. Alive! He kicked his feet off from the ground and the grey-robed figure instantly rose, his speed several times faster than the second elder who had every single ounce of his mystical energies drawn to a full surge. Fengjiu had immediately raised her guard when she had seen the maniacal look on the second elder's face. But, when she saw that he was going to detonate his mystical powers to bring her down together in mutual destruction, her eyes had showed shock, never having expected that the second elder would go this far for the Sioux family. Immediately, she quickly retreated backwards, every single step taken trying to avoid him as quickly as possible. After all, the self-detonation of a master warrior at the pinnacle level was not exactly a small joking matter and she wasn't prepared to pay for the slightest slip with her own life. However, as she was beating a retreat, a grey-robed figure leapt quick as a demon into the fray. She had not even gotten a clear glimpse of the figure before she saw him deliver a mighty kick into the second elder who was leaping straight towards her, sending him flying straight up into the sky. Arg! I refuse to concede. Boom! Ka-boom! Resounding through the night sky, was the second elder's unreconciled voice filled with hatred trailing off. Before the voice ended, a loud boom of explosion was heard and the second elder's body exploded into smithereens high in the sky, giving out a huge ear-splitting explosion. The bright flare of light that lit the skies and the loud boom completely shattered the still tranquility of the night, waking up almost the entire Cloudy Moon City in an instant. Just as the cultivators within the Cloudy Moon City from varying regions were speeding towards this place, up upon the roof, the grey-robed old man turned to face Fengjiu, an amicable smile upon his face, but within that pair of eyes, was a gaze tinged with a kind of excitement, coupled with a strange glint, that stared at her as if those eyes were locked onto a prey.